Hello and welcome back to An Old Man Watches, where today I will be talking about the 1980 Italian film Contamination, also known as Alien Contamination, to try and make the plot even more obvious. And the film begins with a large ship drifting into New York Harbor. A team board the vessel to investigate what is believed to be an empty, abandoned hulk, but they soon make a grim and perplexing find: the mutilated remains of the original crew, all gathered in one place. The apparent cause of these deaths? Hundreds of football-sized green eggs which are hidden inside the coffee containers that are the ship's official cargo. When disturbed, these eggs explode in a shower of viscous, highly toxic liquid, instantly fatal to those it touches. Only one member of the investigating team, a Brooklyn cop named Tony Harris, survives the journey to the ship. On his return to shore, Tony is immediately spirited away by Section 5, a secret government body set up to deal with such strange cases. Heading up the Section 5 task force is Colonel Stella Holmes. She establishes a link between the green eggs and a recent mission to Mars that went badly awry. One of the two astronauts disappeared, and the other, a Commander Hubbard, had a breakdown and subsequently became an alcoholic. With Tony Harris in tow, Colonel Holmes sets off to interrogate Commander Hubbard. Perhaps if they can force him to reveal the truth of what happened on Mars, they can find the secret of how this menace came to Earth, and potentially a way to stop it. So Contamination was conceived, written and directed by Luigi Cozzi. Fresh off the success of Star Crash, his bonkers space opera ode to Star Wars and Ray Harryhausen films, Cozzi wanted to make another science fiction film, and it should probably be no surprise that this project would once more draw heavy inspiration from Hollywood. In this case, of course, the inspiration came from the famed 1979 sci-fi horror classic Alien. I'm a big fan of Star Crash, not because it's a good film, it is not, but because it is so shamelessly a lovingly absurd, over-the-top pastiche of all the things that have inspired it. It's badly written and nonsensical, but it's having a great time and it wants you to have one too. Unfortunately, I find Contamination to be much less successful, so let's talk about what went wrong. And the single biggest problem is that Contamination has a serious identity problem. Having been directed by instructor Claudio Mancini that he should do something similar to Alien, Cozzi dutifully delivered a script with the moniker Alien Arrives on Earth, which is rather a case of putting the plot in the title, and I can see why it wasn't the final choice. One problem with the actual final choice, though, at least when it lacks that extra qualifier of alien contamination, is that the title has pretty much nothing to do with the film. And the title change was apparently the producer's decision. Contamination was the working title for an earlier film he had been developing, but which was abandoned. I guess he just really liked the title. A bigger problem was that after explicitly requesting an alien-inspired film, the producer now also insisted that Cozzi rewrite the script to include more James Bond-style elements. Personally, I'm not ruling out the possibility that he saw Moonraker and got excited about the possibilities of the mashups. Alas, however, this combination was not to prove a chocolate and peanut butter case of two great tastes that taste great together. Instead, it was definitely a case of, no one can serve two masters. The resulting film fails to satisfy either as a Bond-style investigation/action film or as a science fiction horror movie. It is leaden and anemic, a problem it attempted to rectify by throwing in some extremely gory effects. These don't help, and in some ways they may have proved counterproductive. They got the film listed on the UK's Video Nasty Register, though, as with many of the movies so classified, this was a disproportionate reaction, in my opinion. Mantle over the Cannibal God, this is not. It's not really going to upset anyone, I don't think. I imagine that Mancini's late changes to both the script and character of the film made the movie's production a less than perfect experience for Luigi Cozzi, and his problems weren't about to stop there. Due to budgetary limitations, Cozzi had set his film on Earth. Now, Ridley Scott's Alien was the obvious inspiration for this movie, and you may have heard people talk about how that film was a low-budget production and how amazing it was that Scott made it look so good despite his financial constraints. And to be fair, it is a great-looking film. But when people say that it was low budget, they're talking in Hollywood metrics, not Italian cinema metrics. So to be clear, when I say Cozzi had budgetary limitations, what I mean is that this film's budget was roughly 2% of that of Alien. In other words, if anything went wrong during the 8-week shooting period, there was nothing in the kitty to fix it. And, if the director is to believe, go wrong things did. Cozzi had wanted to use animation or stop-motion photography to portray the alien monster at the film's climax. These were techniques that he had used in Star Crash. But he was once again overruled by the producer, who insisted that an animatronic version of the monster be constructed instead. Now, if we're to believe Cozzi, this machine failed to work properly and could barely move, so he had to use rapid jump cuts to try and hide the fact that it was being pulled around by stagehands. The emphasis there being on try. Now, once again, you may be thinking of the famous Hollywood tale of how Steven Spielberg had issues with the mechanical shark in Jaws and found a way to turn those problems into an advantage. Well, I mean, number one, Cozzi is no Spielberg. But again, Spielberg had so much more time and money, in fact, the cost to produce Jaws ballooned to more than double the original budget, that the two instances are not really comparable. And again, we're talking about a movie that had 50 times the budget of this film once all of the overruns are factored in. Now, as with Cozzi's earlier film Star Crash, Contamination offers some unintentional comedy in its dialogue and narrative beats. Cozzi was certainly not above massive plot handwaves of the, oh, didn't I mention I can see the future kind of level, and has a tendency to mash influences together, such as having a far future robot who talks and acts like he's a sheriff in the cheesiest of 1930s westerns. English was also not his first language, of course, which likely doesn't help the gracefulness of some of his English language dialogue, and would complicate the process of assessing the actors' performances. In Contamination, he appears to have tried to set up a potential love triangle where Aris and Hubbard would be in competition for the affections of Colonel Holmes. This founders on the simple problem that the dialogue between the two male characters comes across as more flirtatious than does between either man and the Colonel. Much like I would like this to be on purpose, this is doubtless not what Cozzi intended. In 1980, no movie aimed at a wide audience was going to have a couple of potentially homosexual men as its major characters and heroes. Still, it's a good example of how translation and delivery of a line can trip up a film's intent. At the end of the day, though, there's not a lot to recommend Contamination as a viewing experience. You're far better off seeing the movies that so obviously inspired it, or tracking down Star Crash if you're really in the mood for Cozzi at his most unabashedly unconstrained and ridiculous. Next time, we head all the way back to 1925 to look at a silent film that demonstrates that special effects extravaganzas have been a much more prevalent and longer history than most of us realise. We're going to look at the very first screen adaptation of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's The Lost World. But that's next time. Until then, thanks for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you've seen today's movie, let me know what you thought of it.